G20 ਇੱਕ ਅਜਿਹਾ ਫੋਰਮ ਹੈ ਜਿੱਥੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੀਆਂ ਵੱਡੀਆਂ ਇਕਨੋਮੀਜ਼ ਮਿਲਦੀਆਂ ਹੈ। तो ਇਹ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਲਈ ਇੱਕ ਅੱਛਾ ਇੱਕ ਅਵਸਰ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਹੈ। This time when this G20 meetings are taking place, there is also very serious geopolitical tension. So if the global institutions, when they are not able to resolve many of those problems, so we only hope that by the summit meeting which is going to take place in September, तो हो सकता है कि ਹੁਣ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਦਿੱਕਤਾਂ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ G20 ਉਮੀਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅੱਛਾ ਰੋਲ ਪਲੇ ਕਰੇਗਾ। ਔਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਸੀ ਹੈ, ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਅੱਛਾ ਮੌਕਾ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਹੈ G20 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾਉਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ।
We welcome you to the new edition. This is the University Connect program in the Guru Nanak Dev University in the holy city of Amritsar. This is the city which recently hosted the G20 summit. Yes, the G20 summit which India has been presiding over this year, and to understand the geopolitical impact of it on India and how we are placing ourselves globally, we are joined by a very special guest. Of course, we are talking about Professor Sachdeva. Professor Sachdeva has been a special guest today. Mr. Sachdeva has been contributing immensely to the international studies and security studies in India, and he's a professor in the Jawaharlal Nehru University. Thank you so much, sir, for joining us today. Sir, first, how are you feeling in Amritsar today? How is your feeling when you came by here in the city, especially in the moment of G20?
Well, it's always good to be in Punjab. I was born and brought up in Punjab, so there are fond memories, everything, Punjab, so you really feel connected to the roots. Of course, it's always very nice feeling whenever you visit any place in Punjab, and specifically Amritsar, which is really a great place.
तो आप भी पंजाबी तो है ना?
बिल्कुल
तो
पंजाबी।
आपका पंजाबी कनेक्शन क्या है? किसी का होता है कि मुझे खाना बहुत पसंद है या मुझे यहाँ की जगह बहुत पसंद है।
नहीं, पूरे पंजाब में तो उसका it's a great connection with Punjab, and of course food and Amritsar both are very well connected with each other, and whenever you come to Amritsar you can't really avoid Amritsari food, so that's everybody knows, so there's nothing special about it.
Sir, coming to the G20 University Connect, this is a unique program because इस बार पहली बार ऐसा देखा है कि they have come up with this Youth Connect approach. How are you looking at this approach, especially when we talk about G20 summit where India is presiding over it? It's a great opportunity.
Well, this is in fact a very great initiative which I think the Prime Minister Narendra Modi has initiated. Normally you have all these international meetings which are normally elite meetings, and which also takes place at major cities. But I think what this time we are seeing under the presidency of India, G20 presidency. So this is what I think the government is trying to have, what you call the Jan Bhagidari. So also connect with not just only the policy makers, but large number of people in different ways. So we are also seeing meetings taking place at in various cities in India, and also this particular program is University Connect program, in which more than 75 universities are selected by the government, and these are also universities which are also somehow coinciding those cities where different meetings of G20 are taking place. So the idea is that people should also feel proud that India is hosting G20 this year, and at the same time since these meetings are taking place, there is also a lot of enthusiasm among students. So they are also trying to learn more and more what exactly this G20 is, how they can connect with G20, what kind of new ideas can be generated, and what is there really for India in this particular G20. So in that way, the idea is that really connect with more and more people and also making awareness about G20.
You said it right. Youngsters want to know how through these programs या G20 as a whole, लोग समझ नहीं पाते G20 है क्या. तो G20 में how do you think youngsters can participate and benefit out of it?
Well, G20, as you know, is a grouping of 20 major economies. And these economies are, a large part of the global economy is covered by these, major 20 economies. Not just only 20 economies, but you have 19 countries and the European Union where you have 27 members. And out of those 27, two are, of course, 3 are also member of the G20 itself. So it means, when major economies like Europe, China, United States, India, Japan, when they are actually, and many other countries, when they are discussing global issues. So obviously, whatever is going to be decided in many of these meetings, ultimately is going to affect each and every one. Of course, this is G20 is not also a forum where things are implemented directly. But those, but whatever is decided by, the major minister, particularly the economics ministers and trade ministers, and also by the head of the governments and the states, particularly the summit level, and they obviously give a very clear direction to all the global institutions, how in the next coming years, coming months, what kind of policies are expected from them. So in that sense, whatever is going to be discussed in many of those meetings, the hundreds of these meetings are going to take place in different areas in India. So that will obviously affect each and every one.
So we are hosting this event. We are hosting it, in the light of the tensions. You can see the US-China tension, the Ukraine issue, the crisis we saw. How do you look at this whole summit placing India in the right manner in the global space? At this point, we are considering to host a summit. तो आपको क्या लगता है हम अपने आप को geopolitical space में कहाँ किस पहचान में रख?
Well, you're right. This time when this G20 meetings are taking place, there is also very serious geopolitical tension. The tension is also between the United States and China, which are two major economies and two major members of the G20. But more importantly, what is happening in the last 1 year war in Ukraine. And as we are aware that many of these meetings, particularly the meeting of the foreign ministers, and also meeting of the finance ministers and the central bank governors, those they were very much dominated by discussions on Ukraine. Still, on large number of issues, they were able to come together with a certain consensus. But of course, the geopolitical tension is there. But we also know that G20 as a forum is mainly a forum to discuss economic issues. But the idea which many of the Western countries are saying that since the war in Ukraine is affecting global economy, whether you look at the energy prices or you look at food prices or many other tensions in the global economy, these are happening because of the Ukraine crisis. So we also need to discuss the crisis in Ukraine or the war in Ukraine. But of course, many countries within G20, including India, are also trying to argue that yes, these are important issues, but there are other forums to discuss, particularly the United Nations Security Council, where you can discuss security issues and war-related issues. So we should really concentrate more on, say, economic issues. And India, since it's in a right place at this particular time, because India also has very good relations with both parties, both with Russia and also with the Western countries. So in that sense, India might be able to balance some of the issues. We also saw earlier during the Indonesian presidency also that there was certain tension, but at the end they were able to come out with the kind of consensus communique. So we only hope that by the summit meeting, which is going to take place in September, India would be able to work with all partners within G20 and will be able to have some kind of consensus.
Sir, when you were talking about the other forums where they can discuss the tensions that are creeping up and cropping up between other countries, there has been a question on the effectiveness of those forums. We will not question or name them, but आपको भी पता है कि उन forums की effectiveness पे questions उठे हैं, लोगों का शंका बढ़ा है. So उस पे how do you look at the balance being created? Because is this platform going to help in that discussion also majorly?
Well, you're absolutely right that it's not that there is no harm in even naming them, because we know the institutions. I mean, whether the United Nations Security Council, or you look at the WTO, or you look at the WHO, now all those institutions which were supposed to take care of the global problems or resolve global problems. This is what those institutions were created. But we also know that those institutions have not been very effective. In fact, even if you look at all the discussions at the United Nations Security Council in 2022, large number of meetings took place on Ukraine issue itself, but simply they could not come out with any resolution for this particular problem. Now, when those institutions of global governance are not working, so obviously then there is a expectation that a forum like G20 perhaps would be able to come out with, it has major responsibilities now, because this is also a forum where it's not just only about some major developed countries or the G7 countries, but also you have large number of very important countries from the south, from developing countries. They are also part of this, and they are major economies. So if the global institutions, when they are not able to resolve many of those problems, then maybe when the major leaders are going to meet in different meetings in G20, perhaps they might be able to find some kind of resolution, some kind of consensus, but it's not very easy because of the institution itself. They are not working, but there is expectation and there is also responsibility of G20 to come out.
Then, sir, what is the need of such institutions when they are not effective? Do you think these institutions have power, or they're just bodies existing for the sake of looking up to them?
See, well, I mean, whether they are working or not very effective, but without those institutions, you can't do anything, because even if United Nations is not very effective, but without United Nations, you cannot do anything, because ultimately every country is a member of this, and every country has committed to certain basic charter and principles of the United Nations. Yes, because the only problem is that today's United Nations Security Council and many other institutions of global governance, they do not reflect the realities of today's world, because they were created mainly after the Second World War.
Yes.
Like India is a big country, a large economy, a very important country, and the largest country by population now, but it's not a member of the United Nations Security Council.
Yes.
So it means the kind of role India can play within those institutions, we do not have that kind of still capacity to play there, because those institutions were created at different times. So that's why even within G20 we are asking major reforms in those institutions of global governance, and those reforms of course have been discussed at various forums, but there are vested interests. So countries, those who have power now in those institutions, they do not want to give away their power to other countries. But of course, so it means when they are ineffective, that is why perhaps this kind of forum become much more important.
Yes. So you've always been an advocate of peace and stability. That's been your most favorite subject, security in South Asia. Challenges if you point out, ये major challenges है जिनको लेके हमारी security and peace is always questioned, whether it is the international turmoil, whether it is the turmoil inside the country. We are a diversity of a huge, distinguished population here, culture here. We have kind of overcome that, but we are still struggling inside and outside. What is your way of addressing it in a very brief manner?
Well, I mean, there are, if you look at, say even our own South Asian region. Now, this is a region where there is a lot of potential of cooperation, peace and stability, but we also know that this is also the region which is one of the least integrated region in the world. Now, we know where the problems are, because there are serious difficulties. The relations are very difficult between India and Pakistan. Situation in Afghanistan has been unstable for the last many decades. So as a result, the kind of potential of cooperation which can happen within South Asia itself, we have not been able to realize that potential. And once I think these economies, as you can see from some of the other regions in the world, look at the European Union. I mean, they were also fighting among them for, for decades and centuries, but they have come together. So what we really need to look into that how we can really resolve some of those existing political problems. And once those things are resolved, then obviously there is a, there are of course one integrated economy within South Asia. I mean, you can see how you can really, I mean, from Amritsar when one is sitting, and Pakistan and Afghanistan are so close. And I spent a couple of years in Afghanistan. I know how things are so connected between this whole region. So
एक ज़माने में तो पूरा पंजाब ही हमारा
जी
पाकिस्तान की तरफ आधा पंजाब पड़ जाता है.
जी जी.
So we are having major area.
Yeah, I mean, the culture is the same. I mean,
भाषा, तरीका.
भाषा सब कुछ सही है, but वो ये there are all different problems which perhaps we have not been able to resolve. So what, I mean, the challenge before our policy makers is that there are examples in the world that they have been able to resolve their issues. I mean, it's not that only this region has certain problems. There are many other regions where they were fighting war among themselves. So the kind of institutional structures they have been able to create. So those institutions have certain examples. So we also need to follow some of them and see how we can resolve our own problems.
What according to you is the basic problem if we talk about India? क्या है वो प्रॉब्लम जो पीस और कॉन्फ्लिक्ट बोलते हैं ना, ये दोनों टर्म्स साथ में यूज कर लिए जाएं तो फाइंड पीस इन chaos.
If you look at our own country, such a diverse country with different cultures and with different religions and all kind of diversity. So one thing we have already learned that how India has been able to held together itself in the last 75 years, because many people were not even expecting that India would be able to survive. This is because of only democracy. That if we continue having very strong democracy and also strengthening the roots of democracy, and also everybody's partner in the whole your democratic process and your development process, then I think all kind of problems can be resolved. So our own experience and also with the world experience, we know that if we continue strengthening our democracy, I think many of our problems can be resolved.
What is that funda for strengthening our democracy?
No, I think it's
we have election down there.
Well, it's not just only elections. Elections are just one part of your democratic process. I mean, you're thinking about all the institutions of democracy. So it's not just only about few policy makers. Everybody has to contribute. And in a very, wherever you are, how you can really, whatever the contribution our own contribution to strengthening our own democracy, and then I think we'll be able to resolve many of our problems. And if there are certain problems, then of course things are very serious.
Sir, taking you with one anecdote, आपकी जिंदगी का कोई किस्सा, any anecdote you want to share with us? आपने इस पूरे space में इतना time बताया, international relations, security space, how the country should be working around with each other to create security and peace. So आप कोई ऐसा किस्सा शेयर कर सकते हैं जो आपके जहन में है, जो किसी एक ग्लोबल मीटिंग में या समिट में आपने एक्सपीरियंस किया या यूएन फोरम में आपने किया और आपके साथ वो एक लेसन की तरह स्टेज विद यू फॉर स्टूडेंट्स?
Well, I think as you know, I spent a couple of years in Afghanistan, and when I went to Afghanistan first time in 2006. I was born and brought up here in Punjab in Bathinda, and the kind of I would say the atmosphere, the kind of technologies in which I grew up in the 1970s, I saw roughly the similar kind of cultural and economic environment in Afghanistan, particularly in Kabul in those years. And another thing also. I realized that why I was always trying to understand that why people of Afghanistan were always they have very affection towards India, friendliness towards India. Why they were looking towards India? Because if you look at when I was there, I also saw that so many Western countries, they were spending much more money in Afghanistan, because India spent about on the development projects about 3 billion in Afghanistan. But if you look at the Europeans and Americans, they spend much more than that. So what I really realized, that this was their aspiration, that to become like India, that how still you keep your conservative values, your own cultural environment, still how you could be democratic, how you could modernize your
So
society.
they look up to India.
They were really, so it means it was not just only few development projects which India was doing, but of course that was also very useful. But their idea that what kind of nation they want to build for
Wow,
themselves.
so they look
So
up
they
to
are looking,
India.
and it's not just only, in fact, I realized only in Afghanistan, you look at all other Central Asian countries, because what they really feel is that, in many of countries which are, in our neighborhood, when they look towards, say, for example, China, they feel a bit threatened. When other Central Asians, when they were looking, of course, they were also very close to Russians, but they still feel threatened. But, when they look towards India, they feel India is a benign power which is not really threatening them in any way. So they would like to have more and more connections with us, and they would like to be like India. So it means this is also a challenge for us, because if we are a multicultural society, and we are a democratic society, and the kind of modernization model which we are following, and it's not just only useful and important for us, this is also really very good aspiration for so many other countries in the region, not just only within South and Central Asia. You look at many other African countries as well. So there is a major responsibility on us,
Yes.
that we have to continue with this kind of model, where it's not only it's important for us, for more than 1.4 billion population of this country, but other billions of people in the developing world, they are also looking towards India in a big hope that what India is really doing, they can also do.
One question I definitely have on the economic aspect, because for the G20 summit, economic aspect plays a major role. How are you looking at India's economic status? From a youngster point of view also, if we can explain, because we are in a phase of startup culture. So where are we economically, and where do we see ourselves placed economically in the geopolitical picture?
Well, India was always a big country. India was always democracy. But what has really changed in the last 25 years is your 6 to 7% growth. So as a result of that, everybody sees that there is a huge opportunity in India as a market. They can also invest. But if you look at today's major problems or major issues, challenges which the world is facing, whether you look at the sustainable development goals, whether you look at the climate change issues or the green transition, and none of these targets are going to be met if there is no serious growth happening in India.
What is that growth number you say? 6,
Well,
7%
it's because our ambition is for the last many years to grow at least 8 to 9% growth every year. Because what we have seen that the 7% growth which India has achieved in the last 25-30 years. Now, even if it may not trickle down, even if not that everybody has benefited equally, because we know the inequality is also increasing in some way, but still we have also seen the numbers of poverty has come down. So it means this has benefited almost everybody. Somebody has benefited more, somebody has got less benefit, but it has benefited everyone. So all our major challenges, particularly related to poverty and basic infrastructure, we cannot really get out of those problems unless we get into 7-8% of this growth. And that growth is not just only important for India, because if you look at all the major targets, global targets on green transition, on sustainable development and climate change, if India is able to grow, India has ambitious targets, I think world will be able to achieve many of them. So that's why India becomes very important at this stage of global economic development.
But sustenance of that growth number is also very important.
It's very important, because if we are not able, if we falter, if we are not able to achieve our own targets, then obviously global targets are going not to be.
Now, so one last question I have about the youth of India. You know how Youth Connect, that is why we have this University Connect youth program with RIS think tank helping us organize it all over India. What is that you think very specifically? The youth flavor today is very different. They want to grow fast, they want to grow everywhere. There's no such limitation ki sirf yahan rahenge, we will grow in this space. It's all about growth exponentially. How do you look at the youth today? And what is your message for them to understand growth, to understand India, to understand the global space? Because in that whole fetching things fast, they lose out the main foundation to things.
No, I think, what we have is, as everybody knows, that we have a huge youth population. In that sense, the demographic is in our favor compared to if you look at most of the developed countries, and also even China, because their demography is also changing. So we really need to now take advantage of our demographic dividend, but that can only be done if they are really properly educated and properly skilled. And if you are not able to do that, of course, we have a huge education infrastructure, but the quality of our education still in many of those institutions need to be improved. And if we are able to really utilize our own potential, then there is no limit. Then we can achieve many of our targets, and even the world can achieve many of those targets.
Are we close to it, or are we very far from it?
Well, I mean, there are targets we have been achieving, but of course the challenge is huge. And there is also not just challenge, there is also a serious issue, because if you are not able to achieve this, then this whole major youth population can become a very serious social discontent. Because if you have unemployed youth, and if they are not getting proper jobs, then of course then all other kind of problems can be occurred.
So, bilkul, sir. I think you've quite briefed and explained us various aspects where we should look forward to. But Punjabi में आप थोड़ा बोल सकते हैं?
G20 एक एजा फोरम है जिथे सारे दुनिया दियां वड्डियां इकोनॉमीज़ मिलदियां हैं, सारे उत्थे लीडर मिलते हैं। तो जड़ियां गल्लां G20 दियां सारियां मीटिंगां हो रही हैं, जड़ियां पूरे इंडिया दे विच 200-300-400 मीटिंग होनी है, अलग अलग तरह दियां, कुछ फॉर्मल होनी है, कुछ इनफॉर्मल मीटिंग्स होनी है। तो ये इंडिया दे ਲਈ एक अच्छा एक अवसर मिलिया है, मौका मिलिया है। ਇੱਕ ਤਾਂ ਇਹ ਦਿਖਾਉਣ ਦਾ ਕਿ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਕਰ ਗਿਆ ਹੈ ਬਾਕੀ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਨੂੰ। ਦੂਸਰਾ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਇਹ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਮਾਹੌਲ, ਜਿਹੜੀ ਆਪਾਂ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਕਰ ਰਹੇ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਜਿਸ ਤਰ੍ਹਾਂ ਦਾ ਜੀਓਪੋਲਿਟੀਕਲ ਮਾਹੌਲ ਬਦਲਿਆ ਹੋਇਆ ਹੈ, ਬੁਰੀ ਟੈਨਸ਼ਨ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਫੈਲੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। ਔਰ ਪਹਿਲੇ ਉਮੀਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਸੀ ਕਿ ਪੈਂਡੈਮਿਕ ਤੋਂ ਬਾਅਦ ਪੂਰੀ ਰੋਬਸਟ ਗਰੋਥ ਜੋ ਹੈ ਇਕਨੋਮੀ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਏਗੀ। पूरी दुनिया रिसेशन, काफ़ी कंट्री रिसेशन ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੂਝ ਰਹੇ ਹੈ, ਔਰ ਇਵਨ ਡਿਵੈਲਪਡ ਜਿਹੜੀਆਂ ਅਰਥ ਵਿਵਸਥਾਵਾਂ ਹੈ ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਵੀ ਮਹਿੰਗਾਈ ਦੀ ਮਾਰ ਵਧੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ। तो ਇਹ ਸਾਰੇ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ G20 ਨੇ ਕਾਫੀ ਜੋ ਪਹਿਲਾਂ ਅਸੀਂ ਦੇਖੀਏ 2006-07 ਦਾ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਸੰਕਟ ਆਇਆ ਸੀ ਵਿੱਤੀ ਹੈ, ਜਾਂ ਜਿਹੜਾ ਯੂਰੋਜ਼ੋਨ ਸੰਕਟ ਆਇਆ ਸੀ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ G20 ਨੇ ਇੱਕ ਬਹੁਤ ਅੱਛਾ ਰੋਲ ਅਦਾ ਕੀਤਾ ਸੀ। तो हो सकता है कि ਹੁਣ ਆਉਣ ਵਾਲੇ ਸਮੇਂ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਦਿੱਕਤਾਂ ਆ ਰਹੀਆਂ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ G20 ਉਮੀਦ ਕੀਤੀ ਜਾ ਰਹੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਅੱਛਾ ਰੋਲ ਪਲੇ ਕਰੇਗਾ। ਔਰ ਉਹਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਕਿਉਂਕਿ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੀ ਪ੍ਰੈਜ਼ੀਡੈਂਸੀ ਹੈ, ਇੰਡੀਆ ਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਇੱਕ ਅੱਛਾ ਮੌਕਾ ਮਿਲਿਆ ਹੈ G20 ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਆਪਣੇ ਆਪ ਨੂੰ ਦਿਖਾਉਣ ਦੇ ਲਈ। ਔਰ G20 ਦੇ ਰਾਹੀਂ ਜੋ ਇੰਡੀਆ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਜੋ ਆਰਥਿਕ ਤਰੱਕੀ ਹੋਈ ਹੈ ਉਹਨੂੰ ਵੀ ਦੂਸਰੇ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ, ਖਾਸ ਤੌਰ ਸੇ ਤੀਸਰੀ ਦੁਨੀਆ ਦੇ ਗਰੀਬ ਦੇਸ਼ਾਂ ਦੇ ਨਾਲ ਸਾਂਝਾ ਕਰਨ ਦਾ ਇੱਕ ਮੌਕਾ इंडिया को मिला है।
बिल्कुल, थैंक यू सो मच गुरु नानक देव यूनिवर्सिटी में आप आए, हमें इतना समय दिया। वी आर वेरी थैंकफुल to Mr. Gulshan Sachdeva, who is a great renowned scholar, academician, who's contributed greatly to international studies, to social peace and security, and he's a professor in Jawaharlal Nehru University, and we extend our gratitude and love for your support and knowledge that you extend to the student. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.